All right. Welcome, everybody. If you are one of the EV ambassadors I talked to about paneling the Q&A, could you please rename yourself to your name and add your car to it too? Just so when we get started with the Q&A section, it's just a little bit easier for folks to identify you all. But without further ado, I think I will start this webinar. So thank you all for joining us today for our winter driving webinar. This is a really important topic, especially thinking about this time of the year. So just so you know, we would love it if you would all stay on mute for the actual presentation part of this webinar. And you are free to unmute yourselves during the Q&A when you want to ask questions. We will be sending a recording of this webinar around to everybody after the presentation concludes. And we'll also be sending some slides and maybe some handy links that we find that people are interested in. And so with that, we will continue with the presentation. Okay, so just to formally introduce myself, my name is Devin DeLibero, and I work at Green Energy Consumers Alliance on the Drive Green program. I am the electric vehicle program coordinator here today. I have two of my colleagues who you'll see and probably hear from a little bit later during the Q&A, Anna Vanderspeck, who is our program director, and Kelly Shin, who is the program associate. So we work for Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We are based in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and our mission as a nonprofit is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. We do that work through our policy and advocacy work, and we also do it through our programmatic work like Drive Green. Drive Green is an educational tool for folks who are interested in electric vehicles, but it also serves as a way to get people actually into those electric vehicles because we have our electric vehicle shopping tool, which I encourage you all to check out at the end of this presentation if you haven't already done so. So what to expect today? So today we are going to do a brief presentation followed by a Q&A session from EV owners who we call EV ambassadors. Please, if you have questions for them during the presentation, put them in the chat. We'll get to them later. If you have questions about the presentation itself, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. We'll answer them in the chat or we'll talk about them during the Q&A session. If you feel like you want to voice your questions during the Q&A session, you are more than welcome to do so. We just ask that you use the raised hand feature so we can make sure no one talks over anybody. As far as the presentation itself, we'll talk about all the things you need to know about electric vehicles and winter driving. So we'll talk about low temperatures and what they mean for your vehicle. We'll talk about winter weather and how snow and ice can affect the range of your electric vehicle. And we'll also conclude with some fun facts. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about today is low temperatures and why exactly your range decreases in winter. So you should know this is not specific to electric vehicles. Both gas-powered and electric vehicles have a decrease in range and lower temperatures. On a good day, a gas-powered car has only about 20% efficiency. So you can just imagine what that means for winter temperatures and what that could mean for your wallet. Electric vehicles, conversely, have an average efficiency of about 70% or more. So while the efficiency does decrease in winter times, it's just not as bad as your traditional gas-powered car. Efficiencies of EVs decrease during winter because chemical and physical reactions in the battery occur more slowly in cold temperatures. And so in layman's terms, batteries don't like cold weather. They just don't operate as well. So the energy must be put into warming the battery. We just said that. But then there's also energy that needs to be used for the cabin features. So that is just to heat the cabin, to defog your windows, to heat the seats, heat steering wheels. Both in electric vehicles and in gas-powered cars, this can lead to a decrease in range. But with electric vehicles in particular, adding heating up the battery, that leads to even a little bit more of a decrease in range. So just keep that in mind. And you may think, well, that's all well and good, but what does that actually mean for me? So how much range will you lose? Well, we did some poking around. And one thing we found was the Norwegian Automobile Federation, and they did a test of the most popular EVs in Norway back in January of 2020. And they found that EVs lose an average of about 20% of their stated range at temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. However, they did not preheat the battery or the cabin. So preheating the battery in the cabin is really helpful in order to like mitigate any range losses. So what that means basically is while the car is still plugged in, you want to make sure you have like all your heating things on to make sure the cabin's warm, and you want to make sure your battery is warmed up so it doesn't take any extra energy from the battery the stored energy in the battery and decrease your range. If you want all the stats on this study and you're curious about which cars in particular that they focused on, there is a link on the slide, and I will pass the slides along in the email after this presentation, so you can check that out there. Okay, so when you see an EV listed, it's likely to have an EPA estimated range. So like a Chevy Bolt, for example, has about 259 miles of estimated range. That's what's going to be shown everywhere. It's going to be shown like on our Drive Green website. It's going to be shown on the dealership website, wherever. The EPA estimated range is available and achievable most of the year, but on cold days, like we've kind of alluded to, that does change a bit. So for example, if you have a car with 250 miles of electric range normally, you might get 195 to 222 miles on a very cold day. But it really depends on a lot of different factors. So it could depend on, like your range could depend on how cold it is outside and how many trips you're taking and where you park your car and the conditions on the road, how you're heating your cabin and how high you're keeping the temperature, things like that. So we're going to talk about some of those things in the following few slides because I have a few studies that I want to reference with you all. So the first one was done by AAA. It happened in 2019, and they did a study of 5 cars. They did a study in 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather, 75 degrees weather, and 95 degrees weather to understand the effects of ambient temperature and resulting HVAC use on electric vehicles. The 75-degree temperature was more of like a baseline temperature because you don't need to heat or cool the cabin, and it's kind of like an optimal battery operating temperature. So just keep that in mind. The cars that they studied were the 2019 BMW i3, the 2019 Chevy Bolt, the 2018 Nissan Leaf, the 2017 Tesla Model S 75D, and the 2017 VW e-Golf. So AAA compared how range is affected when not using any of the car's HVAC system versus using the HVAC system in the same cold temperatures or hot temperatures. So without using HVAC system in the 20-degree Fahrenheit weather, it resulted in a 12% decrease in range for the vehicle studied. And that means just keeping the battery warm sapped about 12% of range. When the researchers added the HVAC to heat the cabin, things changed significantly. So so just to preface this, they kept the cabin temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit with the maximum fan speed. But by doing this, that decreased the range by 41%, which is very significant. And I won't downplay that, but there are other factors to mitigate that we'll talk about later. Conversely, in the 95-degree weather, the range decreased by 4% without HVAC. And then using the HVAC to cool the cabin resulted in a 17% decrease in range. So you can see heating drains much more of the battery than cooling. Okay. The second report to talk about here today comes from Consumer Reports. They did an experiment that was very similar to AAA, also in 2019. But this test only compares 2 vehicles and was done in Connecticut, when temperatures were from 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. They studied the Tesla Model 3 and the Nissan Leaf. So you'll see in this chart that the EPA estimated range for the Model 3 is 310 miles, and the Nissan Leaf is 151. So just keep that in mind as I throw some more numbers at you. The study set out to put the EVs through 3 roughly 21-mile trips, which resulted in 64 miles traveled total. And the 64 miles should have put the Tesla at 246 remaining miles and 84 remaining miles for the Nissan Leaf. After each of the 2 first legs, the cars were parked outside for an hour so the cabin temperature would drop. And the cars would have to reheat the cabin for each subsequent leg, which is a bigger draw on the battery, which would reduce your range. So this further supports our claims that cold temperatures and energy used to heat the cabin reduce range of an EV. So if you look at the chart, the actual range used for each vehicle to cover those 64 miles was 121 miles for the Tesla Model 3 and 141 miles for the Nissan Leaf, which meant at the end of those 3 trips, the Nissan Leaf had 10 miles remaining of range, and the Tesla Model 3 had 189 miles of range. So you could see that it really impacted the range, but those were very specific examples in the way that they did it. There are a lot of steps that you can take to not drain your battery so much. One of our handy EV ambassadors, Rod Smith, gave us this chart today. So graph today I wanted to show you all. So Rod has a Tesla Model 3, and this data comes from the Teslafy data monitoring service. It shows just the different efficiency and various temperatures. And so what we concluded from this graph is that there's basically a 25% loss in 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit weather temperatures. And then Rod wanted me to mention that his Tesla has inductive heaters and not heat pumps, whereas newer Teslas, I believe, do have some heat pumps. So if you all have questions for Rod about this slide, we'll take them at the end. Okay, it's not all doom and gloom. There are ways to mitigate these range impacts that are fairly simple. So preconditioning is one of those. Preconditioning means you are heating up your car's battery while it is still plugged in. So this way your battery warms up and operates more efficiently when you start to drive, but you don't have to deplete your battery's reserves to heat it. You can do this on the go with public charging stations too, if you like. And you can also consider charging more frequently while on the go to mitigate these range losses. You also want to use seat warmers and steering wheel warmers, which a lot of these electric vehicles come with, because they do know that range will decrease with winter temperatures. So these features require less energy than heating the air in the cabin and will make you still comfy enough to drive your car and be happy. And this is really unfortunate, but no lead foot. Don't drive super fast when weather temperatures are pretty cold. You want to drive efficiently and turn on regenerative braking or set your car to eco mode. So it's the most efficient way to drive your car. You can capture some more energy that you might have lost. And as always, speed increases drag and drag reduces mileage, unfortunately. Then you also want to make sure, it seems very simple, but clean off your car, because if you have snow on your car, that's going to increase drag, and also it's just unsafe and not really nice to the people who you drive next to. Then you want to park and charge somewhere warm if you can. So that could be in a garage or simply in a sunny spot. That could give you just a couple temperatures difference, and it'll give your battery a chance to have a higher resting temperature. And then let it charge more efficiently. The final thing is battery conditioning. Battery conditioning is kind of similar to preconditioning, but it is different. So certain cars, like the 2023 Hyundai Ioniq 5 and 6, I'm sure there's others, have a feature called battery conditioning that can unlock a 50% improvement in charge time. It's different from winter mode, which some cars have, which is aimed at warming the battery to improve performance in cold temperatures. Battery conditioning mode heats the battery up to a higher target temperature for more efficient and faster DC fast charging. So that is something to consider if you are low on range or want to keep your range up in winter. You can use that feature, and if you have that on your car. And then we'll talk about winter weather. Specifically, we'll talk more about snow and ice and how it can affect you driving electric. Okay, so electric vehicles handle very well, or can handle very well in snow. A lot of it's because they have a lower center of gravity. So if you don't already know, electric vehicles, the battery are stored in the below the footwell of your car. So that gives them a lower center of gravity. And that means that they can handle the roads a little bit better and they're less likely to roll over. All-wheel drive is also an option for electric vehicles. It wasn't at first in many electric vehicle models, and so that could have been a barrier for adoption for some folks. But as we continue on and get more and more models on the market, there are far more all-wheel drive options. For example, Tesla offers all-wheel drive, the Ford Mach-E can offer that, and so can the VW ID4. Another question we get a lot about is snow tires. Do you need snow tires? That answer is really up to you. As someone who's lived in Rhode Island my whole life, I've never had snow tires, but others in more rural or snow-prone areas might prefer them. What I will tell you is that EVs require special tires because they need to be able to handle more weight and deliver more torque to the road when moving away from a stop. So the tread has to be different to handle the near instant torque, and there needs to also be like a foam inlay to quiet the tire noise. So just know they're not your regular gas-powered car tires. They're going to be different if you do decide to get snow tires or any tires for your electric vehicle. I don't know if any of you recognize the image on this slide from a popular football commercial. I think it was a year or two ago. But it was basically talking about EVs in Norway. And we really like to promote, like, if Norway can do it, so can we, because it's much cooler there. And in 2021, all electric cars made up 65% of all sales in Norway. And as of October 2022, battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids make up a combined 89.1% of the market share there, which is just incredible. Granted, they have plenty of monetary incentives that help them reach that number that we do not have as many of. But, they can still do it with their colder temperatures. And if you don't want to take my word for it, I have some fun videos for you to check out once I send the slides around. And then, can you charge outside? We've talked about preconditioning your battery and how, it's preferable maybe to park in a sunny spot or at least in a garage, but you still can charge outside. The only thing you want to think about is the NEMA rating. So that stands for National Electrical Manufacturers Association rating. And you really want a NEMA rating that's of a 3 or 4. So 3 is weather resistant and 4 is made to stand up against like falling dirt and rain and sleet and snow. So it's super durable. And plenty of people charge outside in Norway and in like Canada. So if they can do it there, we can do it here. These things are really made to withstand some inclement weather. Also, your charger should not freeze to your car. So you should, generally speaking, not have that issue. So it is very feasible to park outside and to charge your vehicle outside. Okay, I'm almost done. We're going to talk about fun facts, and then we're going to go to our EV ambassadors. So heat pumps. One of the studies we talked about with Consumer Reports talked about heating the cabin and how inefficient that can sometimes be and how that could be a drain on your range. But heat pumps are very efficient and they help change that a little bit. So more and more manufacturers are opting to install high efficiency air source heat pumps in EVs instead of the more energy intensive resistance heating. And this will reduce the energy draw of the cabin heating and extend your range. Now, there's not an extensive list I could find anywhere of all the EVs that have heat pumps available for their cars. but I did some digging in some of the more popular models that we usually see or talk about. And here's a list of some cars that I know have heat pumps. So if you're interested, check them out. And if you have a particular car that you're interested in that is not on that list, I'm sure that you can do some quick Google searching and find whether or not a car you're interested in has heat pumps. Just to kind of bring home the messaging on charging, it does matter how you do it. So you want to charging slows in colder temperatures. So you just want to keep that in mind. It is more noticeable for DC fast charging. So you definitely want to either precondition if you can for like level 2 or level 1, or you can do the battery conditioning method if your car has that capability, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And then just to sum it up, cold temperatures and winter weather do impact your range as an EV driver. There's no getting around that, but there are very simple steps that you can take to mitigate that to the best of your ability. And finally, of course, if Norway can do it, we can too. So it is very doable and should not persuade you to not get an EV of your own. Okay. So we are going to move this webinar along to the Q&A portion. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. Okay, so we have a lot of folks who volunteered to be EV ambassadors here today. So I'm just going to have you quickly introduce yourselves if you don't mind. Just say your name, the car you own, and if you have any fun quick fact that you want to use as well, you can. I'm going to start with Rod Smith.
Okay, thank you. I'm Rod Smith. I drive a 2019 Tesla Model 3. Before that, I leased a 2017, I think, Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid. So I'm familiar with both of those models.
Great. Mike Duclos, do you want to go next?
Sure, Mike Duclos. I bought a 2019 Chevy Bolt new in February of 2019, and pretty much trouble-free. I think one of the things that people might want to consider is that in any car, if it breaks down or you get stuck, you'd like to have proper clothing on. So if you do that, the cabin temperature can be a little bit lower if you're prepared for outdoors.
Great. Peter Viner Brown.
Hi, I'm Peter Van Brown. I have a 2021 Nissan Leaf SL Plus with the big battery, and I haven't seen a lot of difference in range between when in the winter. Typically in the summer, the Leaf, which is rated at 215 miles range by EPA, goes up to about 260 miles range, and in the winter goes down maybe to 220. So the EP range estimates can be a little deceptive, because if it's mainly down to how you drive. That's what it really boils down to.
Okay, there's a lot of Peters here today. So Peter Ritter, you're next.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, I have a 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E. And my interesting fact is that I have a daughter going to college in Rochester, so I'm regularly doing a 300+ mile trip one way, all times of the year. She's a music performance, so there's concerts in the summer and the winter time, and so I have a lot of experience with the range that I see with the car.
Perfect. I think maybe our third and final Peter Falabella, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Peter Falabella. I have a 2018 Chevy Bolt. I and a dog. I have I go back and forth between Maryland and Massachusetts. It's about a 480-mile trip. And I just want to agree with everything that's been said, that you can make these trips in any kind of weather, long trips in any type of weather. You have to take into account what's been mentioned, but it's certainly doable. And the only fun fact that I would add is that many of these cars, on the Chevy Bolt, it's OnStar, which gives you remote access. So a fun thing to do with an EV that you really you can't really do practically in a regular car is you can heat the cabin remotely, so you can heat it up before you get in. My wife takes care of my grandchildren, and they heat up the car before they get into it using OnStart. But I'm sure other cars can do it different ways too. That also includes cooling in the summertime. You can cool the car ahead of time by using a remote access to it. So, okay.
Well, next I'm going to call on Xavier, who should have plenty of snow stories by now in Colorado.
Hey y'all, yeah, my name's Xavier. I've been driving a Chevy Bolt, 2019 Chevy Bolt for about 3 years. And yeah, as of this year, I had originally leased it, and I just enjoyed my time driving the Chevy Bolt so much that I decided to buy the car. And yeah, originally, when I first had the car, I was living in Massachusetts. Now recently moved to Colorado. So I'm no stranger to long road trips and driving in inclement weather, for sure.
Great. Okay, from on your next.
Hey everybody. I've been an EV enthusiast for over a decade. Started with a BMW i3, but I've driven Model S, owned a Model S, X, Y, and 3. So kind of the whole lineup at different points. I drive up to the White Mountains every winter, about 20 trips a year, and have experimented with a lot of winter tires and things like that. So if anybody has questions about that, I have to answer.
Great. All right, we have a few more of you. So Gina, you want to talk next? And hi to Dexter.
Hey, Dexter and I live in Providence, Rhode Island. My car lives outside. I don't have a garage. So my first winter with my first Leaf was kind of terrifying because I was convinced that I was going to end up stranded somewhere. But once I got to know the car, I found it was really not a problem driving it in winter. I got in the habit of charging it either overnight or in the morning while I was getting ready to work, and clear off the car and then turn off the heat while I was driving around. And of course I wear lots of layers, lots of mittens, have like hand warmers, that kind of thing. So I haven't found driving an electric car any different from driving a gas car in winter.
Great. Okay, Michael Dumond, I think.
Hi, I didn't know I was going to get to say anything. I have a 2023 Chevy Bolt, and I've only got 1,000 miles on it. I picked it up, I think it was August, ordered it online through a dealer. So I haven't really taken it through the winter yet. That's why I'm signed up for this. I want to learn about it. But one question I had is it a good idea to leave it plugged in overnight? I have a home charger option. It's an outdoor, also can do it within my garage.
We will get to that question soon. I just have to introduce Harold, and then I think Eric. Harold, your name.
I'm Harold. We have a 2017 Tesla Model S. We have 140,000 plus miles on it. We drive it year round, all seasons. We in our area, we get the regular type of snow, not like the Rhode Island and upper country snow type of thing, but we drive it all the time. We've been driving electric since 2013.
Perfect. And Eric, I think you are my last but not least.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. Eric here. We are on our third EV. Had an early model Nissan Leaf, then went to 2017 Chevy Bolt, and then during the battery issue, we're able to swap the Bolt for a 2022 Bolt EUV, which is what we are driving now, which we love. And I guess just my one, in addition to everything that everyone else here has said, my one sort of little trick that we follow is generally find that we don't need the heat all the time in the winter here, unless it's brutally cold. And so we often will sort of cycle the heat on and off and turn it on, warm up the cabin, and then just turn it off. And we're generally fine with the heated seats and the heated steering wheel for quite some time. So that helps to extend the range in the winter as well.
Great. All right, well, let's start with Michael's question about heating the cabin, heating it over. Sorry, you said charging it overnight. Was that your question?
I was reading in the manual that to condition the battery for cold weather, you just leave the vehicle plugged in. It won't draw more charge. It just keeps it kind of active in it's sort of a self-heating mode, but I don't know if that's something that people are doing.
Anyone want to take that on?
Well, any sort of heating is going to consume power, and it probably varies from one car to another. I park outside. I don't own a garage, just a driveway. And the first winter that I had my Tesla Model 3, I discovered that leaving it plugged in overnight would cause it to wake up every couple of hours and try to charge the battery. And most of that energy was going into heating the battery rather than charging it. So I got into the habit of not leaving it plugged in overnight during the winter, just to save some energy, and the range might drop by, I don't know, 2 miles, 5 miles or something overnight, but the car has over 300 miles of range, so I don't care about that. I prefer to save the energy.
Okay, if I could jump in. The manual says to keep the car plugged in for a Chevy Bolt. It says to keep the car plugged in if it's under 32 degrees or over 90 degrees. I don't find that the Bolt will do what Rod just said as far as if you plug it in overnight, whether it will wake up and try to charge itself. I don't believe that's happening with a Bolt. The thing you want to be careful of is if you plug it in overnight, is to keep the charge below a certain percentage. People probably know that you shouldn't keep the battery at 100%. They recommend between 20% and 80%. So the later Bolts have the ability, and I'm sure other cars do, to set the maximum charge rate, state of charge at say 80%. Then you can leave it on overnight and it won't go past that. So that's the only thing that I would caution you on. But I think if you can, I would plug it in, the Bolt in, if it gets below 32 degrees, setting the upper limit at 80%. I don't think you're going to pay a penalty like what Rod described. Okay.
So this is Harold. I just wanted to jump in real fast. And for the Tesla, if you keep it plugged in, it helps with the battery management system. So on our remote, our lowest level on the remote is like 50%. So most people keep it between 50 and 80%, or 50 and 90%, and it'll do okay if it's plugged in. I think it's one of Tesla's recommendations. And yes, it may use a little bit of extra energy, but if it's plugged into your house or something like that, or to your charger, that's probably not a big deal for you.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so David has a question and says, does it reduce range less to use a heat pump if you have one than the seat heating? Heat pump is more efficient, but heats a much larger area. Anyone want to take a stab? Peter Viner Brown, you know, I call on you when no one wants to take a stab.
That's a mistake. On the Leaf, if you dig into the menu, it will give you a display to show you how you're using the power. And my Leaf has a heat pump, and it splits the display up into what power you're using to drive the car, what power you're using on your HVAC, whether you're cooling or heating it, and then what power all your accessories are using. So I've played with that and noticed that, and it also tells you if you switch off your heater, how many more miles you're going to get, and it's typically like 8 miles. So you think it's not worth it, and with cooling in the summer, it's even less. So I think that if you're desperate, you can get away with a seat heater and a steering wheel heater. That is going to be more efficient than using your heat pump, because heating up the air in the cabin, it takes a bit of energy. But if you have some means of monitoring, I think the Nero also lets you do that. You can see what's going on if you look at the display. But the seat heaters take very little energy, very small amounts of energy. And I suspect the steering wheel heater takes very little energy as well. A lot less than using the heat pump, which is a compressor. You can hear it running. So if you can stand it, and you're desperate, if you're running out of range, stick with the seat heaters and the steering wheel heater, and you might just get there.
Okay, Mike Duclos, you wanted to say something?
Sure, I'd second what Peter said. My Bolt does not have a heat pump, but from home heating use, the coefficient of performance is something like a factor of 2 or 3. So the heat pump, because it's heating a large space, is going to use quite a lot of energy. The other side of this is that the seat heater and the steering wheel use very, very little. I can hardly see any impact at all using both of those. So the thing I'd note is that they are remarkably effective in keeping you comfortable. Hands lose heat pretty rapidly, and it's actually quite pleasant to put your hands on a warm steering wheel. The seat is also heating you directly, so that is actually pretty pleasant also. So I'd encourage people to definitely use the steering wheel heater and the heated seats as much as you want. I've not seen any impact.
We've got a question in the chat about doors and windows freezing shut for the Tesla Model Y that I saw Harold answered. So Harold, you can use the remote to warm the car up, so it just like warms the cabin and then by extension warms the doors.
Right. They have it on all the models. So it's been on there since the beginning. Some work a little bit better than others, but you have to give it some time. Like if you're parked outside and there's snow all over it, you have to like start it early, or else the snow will still be there. But if you give it a little time, it's very easy to get out of sort of snowy situations.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I find that also taking your fist and lightly banging it on the door handle usually shatters whatever ice is there and clears it up. Just be careful not to bang too hard. I wouldn't want to put a dent in the door.
Okay, and we have
I'll just quickly add to that, Devin, on those handles. The part that you normally pull out, you can press in on. And it's a feature they've added to the newer handles that makes it very easy to break any ice on there, if there is still remaining ice.
Very cool. Okay. Someone else had said something about throw silicone on a rag and wipe it all around the seals. I've never heard of that trick, but it's worth a try for any non-Tesla cars too. And then someone wants to know about tires. So they have a 2020 Hyundai Kona. Last winter, they had trouble getting up and down a slightly steep hill with tires that the car came with. Will snow tires help with the problem, and where should they find them? Peter Viner-Brown.
I remember from the last discussion we had on winter driving that you really shouldn't call them snow tires. They should be called winter tires because they have a different compound. So snow tires were the big chunky things you used to stick on the back of your Chevy Impala, whatever, with big grips and all the rest of it. But, I think it's more correct nowadays to call them winter tires that have a different compound of rubber or plastic, and they stick to any surface a lot better than, regular tires. So, and I think if you look in Consumer Reports, they have recommendations on winter tires, and I noticed someone has mentioned the tires they use in Scandinavia, the Hakkapeliitas, which everybody in Norway seems to use. So I'm not sure, they must be available here because somebody's buying them. So, but if you look in Consumer Reports, they give you a few, ratings on winter tires. So I would look there for their ratings and then go and see how much they cost.
Okay. Froman, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I can recommend Town Fair tire. I've used them for a long time. If you get winter tires through them, they'll actually do the changeover for free for the life of those tires. But there's also lots of other places to get winter tires. You know, going with any name brand and asking for assistance with that, whether it's Michelin, Goodyear, Continental, they all make pretty good winter tires and EV specific ones. I wouldn't say they're absolutely necessary for everybody, but if you do any meaningful winter driving, it can be very helpful. It's not just the grip per se in snowy, icy conditions. It's also the compound, as Peter was mentioning. So in the colder climate, when the temperatures drop, the compounds in even all season tires stiffen up quite a bit, and you can lose a lot of traction and therefore actually breaking safety. So it's not just about getting more grip necessarily in snow and ice and weather, it's actually having more braking grip just in cold temperatures. So there's various reasons to do it. I also initially was hesitant to, invest in another set of tires and be changing these off potentially every 6 months. But what I also realized the more I learned about wheels and tires in general is if you want to extend the life of those, rotating them every 7,000 to 10,000 miles, depending on how you drive, is actually going to really extend the lifetime of those tires and your investment in those tires as well. So let's say you drive 12,000 miles a year, you might want to be rotating them every 6 months anyways. So having a separate set where you might be going in to rotate them anyways and just swapping to a different set, it's not that much additional effort. And then you'll just have 2 sets of tires that last, essentially twice as long. So just some, thought process there for investing in winter tires.
Just a follow-up question for you is that, did you notice any decrease in range when you put the winter tires on, or is it pretty similar?
So it's going to depend. Generally, you might get a small decrease in range, but you have to weigh that. And there's different types of winter or snow tires. Some will have more grip and an even softer compound where you might actually get more of an efficiency hit. I've also had some winter and snow tires that don't seem to, maybe it's a couple percentage points, but I'm happy to give that up for the added safety and traction in the winter time. So I think like anything, there's pluses and minuses. But I haven't seen it's not going to be like a 20% or even 15% hit on your range. At most, you might maybe see a 10% if you go for really aggressive soft compound winter tires. But I'd say in my experience, it's more like 2, 3, maybe 4%.
Okay, so not bad. All right, Charles, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, I recall I was driving through a snowstorm on Interstate 90 in New York State in February of 2021. And all of a sudden I got these displays on my dashboard telling me that I was losing, cameras, radar. And I thought there was something seriously wrong with the car. I stopped and realized that the slush and snow had built up. So it was blocking the sensors and the cameras and the radar from reading what was going on. So something, if you're driving in a slushy snowstorm, be aware that you may have to get outside and clean off the front of the car.
Okay.
Pretty much the one reason why you have to go to the gas station to clean off the snow and slush.
Peter Ritter, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, the other thing to remember is that unlike a gas car, which 80% of the energy is lost as heat, the EVs don't have that. So if any snow does get on your car, it does not melt off. So definitely cleaning off your car, or even after a rainstorm. I was surprised how much rain is in the garage compared to a gas car. So just something I learned the hard way. But the lack of heat does make a difference with the snow and the rain.
How does the Mach-E fare in the snow? Did you get the all-wheel drive one or the rear-wheel drive one?
I did the rear-wheel drive one and have had no issues with it. I did get some winter tires. I can't remember the brand off the top of my head, but I did go with just the rear-wheel drive and no issues.
Xavier?
Yeah, so I guess one point that I have is so currently I live in a situation where I keep my car in a parking garage, and I live in an apartment, so I don't have like any storage space to like keep my tires. So what I do is there's sort of like a partnership between a place in town that stores tires with other places, other shops that will do, the tire swaps themselves. So I'll have my tires stored somewhere else, and then every 6 months, get do the whole thing where they deliver it from the place that stores the tires over to the place that does the swap, and then they do the swap. So if you're in a situation like me where you don't have the ability to store your second set of tires yourself, then there's options available.
We switch gears a little bit to talk about like winter road trips. So someone wants to know if it's easy to locate fast chargers on like longer trips. I feel like some of you are old pros at this kind of question, but who wants to go and talk about it? Peter Falabella, go ahead.
I've had good luck using the Electrify America system and ChargePoint on 500 or 600 mile trips. Also, several times I've been stuck in a remote area with no access to a fast charger, and just for fun, I would go to. I have a Polestar, a 2021 Polestar. I would look for a dealership, so I'd go to a Volvo dealership, and on at least 2 occasions, they let me plug in at the dealership and without charging me, and they had a fast charger, so I could plug in at the dealership for free, rather than trying to hunt for a fast charger. And oftentimes there weren't any available.
Okay, if I could jump in, the app that I use on my phone is called PlugShare, and it's not specific to a particular car, but I find it to be very good. So I would recommend PlugShare, plugshare.com. You download it, you install it on your phone. There's also an app that runs on your computer. I find the computer with its bigger screen is better for planning ahead of time. But when you're on the trip, I use it on my phone in case there's a problem. The good thing about these apps is that when you make a plan for a long trip, you should always have plan B. If, for instance, the charger doesn't work, that's something that is becoming a problem. There are many chargers out there that don't work. I've encountered this on my trips. So you need to have a secondary charger to use if the one that you want to use is not working. And that's where the app PlugShare comes in handy. You can find something that's nearby. The other thing that I want to mention is that for people thinking about taking long trips is that Tesla has promised to open its network of charging stations, supercharging stations, to the rest of us. It hasn't happened yet in this country, but it's supposed to be happening soon. And that will make a huge difference because, as everyone knows, Tesla has the best charging network right now for trips. And soon we've been promised that we'll be able to use the network as well. But to answer your question, PlugShare is what I use.
Okay, we have a lot of hands up. So we're going to start with Xavier first.
Okay. So I actually just recently came off of a long road trip. I drove down to Arizona for Thanksgiving. I have a cousin out there. And the understanding like that, yeah, you're going to take like a 20% dip in range when you're going from hot weather climate to cold weather climate is like something that you have to consider before you even start driving. So like, for example, I was in Arizona, it was like 70 degrees and it's saying that I have whatever, like 250 miles of range, but I know that I'm going to be driving somewhere that's in the 30s and even colder than that. So understanding that I'm going to be taking that hit plus like the fact that all the charging stations are there's fewer options out there as well. I don't know. I guess my point is like just you have to take a lot of factors into consideration before when planning your road trip. And yeah, to the point of like, hey, yeah, there's a lot of like stations that are no bueno. Definitely recommend looking at not only PlugShare, but the actual like app that the charging network is on as well. So yeah, PlugShare, you'll have like a recent history of like those drivers that have had problems with those stations, but the app itself will give you real time status of what those individual stations are like at the place that you're going to. So knowing ahead of time what you're getting, what situation you're getting into, when that's like your only option is like is super important, I'd say.
All right, Harold, you're next.
Just wanted to say that with one of the latest updates from the Tesla nav system, we sometimes when the superchargers go down, or if they're all busy, we get rerouted sometimes to a different supercharger. So that's in our navigation system. And then there's another app called a Better Route Planner that can also help you with cold temperatures, elevation changes, that type of thing. I've used it a couple of times, but not enough to be an expert to say anything about it, but it's out there.
Okay, Peter Ritter, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to a tip for doing a long drive, especially in the winter. I think somebody else said, yeah, you definitely want to plan out your route and maybe even have backups. What I do actually is have those backups mapped out, and I stop more frequently. So unlike a gas car, I don't go all the way down to 20% or 5%. If I'm down to even 50%, I will pull over and charge up. So I can charge very quickly to back up to 80, get back on the road. And that way, if the next stop, if the charger is broken, then I don't have to be as stressed out. So that's kind of my strategy with a long road trip, especially in the winter, is to actually stop and charge more often, because you just don't know if those chargers are going to be working or not.
Very handy tip. Here we got 2 more hands, and then I'm going to move to a question about using the auxiliary mode in your car. So Charles Dudek, you're next.
I agree with Peter. I do the same thing. I charge more often, and I have my phone in the car, PlugShare, EV Connect, ChargePoint, Electrify America, Shell Recharge, a Better Route Planner. And in my car too, if I want to plan a trip with Google Maps, it'll plan it out and show me where the charges are. And then if I want to stop at a charger, the car will start preconditioning the battery before I get to the charger. So I try to, I have so much range anxiety. That's why I have all these apps on my phone and in the car to check everything out.
Okay. Rod, you last but not least.
Yeah, I was going to reiterate the point about a better route planner, especially for a road trip, and especially if you're going in the winter and you're concerned about range loss, because you can input the temperature, headwinds, whatever, and it'll route you to charging stations, and it knows how fast each charging station is. Although I don't think it has any reliability information for that. You'd need PlugShare, but a better route planner will get you the optimum route for getting from point A to point B over a long distance, which something like Google Maps would be completely clueless about. And then I'll also say that a lot of EVs have in-dash navigation that is variable in quality. Tesla does it very well. It's not quite as good as a better route planner, but it's excellent, and it does know about the status of superchargers, as somebody else mentioned. Some others can be a little hit or miss. You need to research for your particular car about that.
Okay. All right, we are going to go to Kathy's question next. They've had a 2022 Ioniq 5 for about 5 months, and they're planning to drive from Michigan on December 15th, and they'll spend 1 night sleeping in the back of the car. Does anyone have any experience using camping or auxiliary mode for heat overnight? The drain on the battery and considerations maybe, and any suggestions? Rod again.
Okay, I don't have any personal experience about this, but I've heard of people doing it, and you'll lose several miles of range, maybe 10 or 20% on the battery if it's particularly cold out. But one thing you can do to mitigate that is to plug in overnight. So you can look, you could do this at, well, any place where there's a public EVSE that you can plug into, or you could look for a campground. And if you have, if the car comes with, or if you buy yourself a 240 volt capable portable EVSE that you can plug into a NEMA 1450 outlet, many campgrounds have those. And so you could go camping in a campground even in the winter and plug in and just draw all the power you need for heat that way.
Harold?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to what Rod said about the campground and all is always call them before you go on your trip, because some campgrounds close up for the winter and you don't want to get stuck somewhere. The second thing is, I know you're taking the trip on December 15th. Maybe you can do one of those like scientific experiments and park your car outside and just test it out. So, stay in your car overnight if you want to and see how it does, see what the battery does for you.
Okay, Peter Ritter.
Yeah, another thing from a good friend of mine who has an RV is that you can park overnight at a lot of Walmarts and Crate and Barrels. So if you don't want to go the campground option, that could be another choice. A lot of Walmarts do have Electrify America. So you could kind of get charged up to a good 80% and then maybe try it that way and have a bathroom and breakfast in the morning.
Great. All right, we are going to conclude this because we have 3 more minutes with Rick Lent. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go back to an earlier point. Somebody may be able to answer it quickly. So I know I have a battery conditioning or preconditioning option on my Bolt EUV 2023. I can't find anything about it in the manual. I'm not sure whether I have the ability to turn it on or off manually, or it's something the car decides to do. I'm not actually sure what battery conditioning in this case means. It's come up here several times.
Peter Falabella, go ahead.
I have a Chevy Bolt. The battery conditioning that I have, and I don't know what it's like in the newer model, but it works behind the scenes. It's not something that you turn on or off. It just intelligently, I guess you would say, it kicks in when it's needed. So I don't have the ability to turn it on or off manually. I don't, do you have a button or something or menu item?
I see it on like the percent of, how, if it's a review of how I've been spending my battery over
Yes.
the last, whatever, there's 3 categories and one of them is battery conditioning. That's all.
I have the same thing, and it's just one of those things you're gonna have to trust the software to kick it in when it's needed. It's not something that I have control over. I don't think you have control over it either.
No.
Kelly too. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think we made perfect timing. It's 12:59. We had some really great questions here today, so I'm really happy that we did this. And just another thank you to our EV ambassadors who came and showed up and answered all these fantastic questions. For the folks who aren't EV ambassadors and still have more questions, feel free to respond to the email that I send after this webinar. And if you have someone in particular that you want to chat more with, just let me know in that email response and I can see if they want to speak with you. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.